Hey everybody, what's going on? Today we are taking a look at Wiraqocha, a board game put out by Sit Down Games, in which you are going to be using some dice rolls to put out workers on this board made up of hexes to gather resources, to attack other players, and basically try to achieve one of the three winning conditions first. The game has a really cool art style, a very cool theme, which is sort of Indiana Jones meets steampunk, and it's just very original. So let's take a look at it, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you what I think. To start the game, first you're going to set up the game board, which is made of all these tiles, and it's randomized. You put the machine's graveyard up here and then all the other tiles out randomly. Every player is going to get all their tokens, which look like this, and everybody has 2 zeppelins. Everybody has 2 drillers and 2 explorers, as well as a base camp is what this is. And then you set out the technology cards over here. 3 of them go face up. The resource cubes, the somnium crystals, as well as a bunch of dice. The game can be won in one of 3 ways. Either someone controls all 4 ruins, which are these tokens sitting here on the board, or someone has enough somnium, which are these crystals, to win, which you would need 11, 9, or 7 of those in a 2, 3, or 4 player game, respectively. Or if you have enough technology cards, then you also win the game. The way turn to turn works, and the game gives you this really handy reference sheet for every player, which are excellent, and they are very, very well done, is the first thing you'll do for each turn, you are going to roll the dice. Normally you get 3, but you might be given more depending on spots you control on the board itself. So let's say I roll there and I have 2 6s and a 2 here. So the first thing I have to do, the first piece that must come on the board, is my base camp. And my base camp with that roll would let me, say I use the 2 6s, I can come on here. And that's where I can put my base camp. And then the 2 is, I could go, say, here. That has a 2 on it there. But since it is not adjacent to my base camp, I cannot introduce a new piece into play. That's one of the rules, is for me to play a new piece onto the board, it has to be adjacent to a previous piece of mine, and if I want to go anywhere else, I'm allowed, but I must move a piece that's already on the board. I cannot play a new piece into the game. So that's one of the things I can do. I can use my dice roll to conquer a new territory. I can also conquer an occupied territory, and the way that works is, let's say for instance that this player has this here. If I roll a combination which gives me 10, which is the way I can go there, and I can, if the piece is simply like this, it is not protected, and I can simply go in there with my own piece and kick theirs out to the graveyard. If, however, the piece is protected, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to do it. And that's another thing you can do with your dice. You're allowed to protect a piece. Like so. You put a die on it, and then anybody who wants to go in there and take over that spot must not only come up with this combination, but a single die stronger than the one you have protecting. Now be aware, every time you do this, and it's your turn again, this is one of the dice that counts as one of the ones you're rolling. So you'd have to take it off if you want to roll 3 at least. Or you can leave it on there where you're rolling fewer dice. Something else you can do is you can use resource cubes to modify your dice rolls. The resource cubes, again, are these black pieces, the cubes here. And you can spend 2 of these to add or subtract 1 from a die. The way you get these, by the way, is from areas that you control that give them to you. So let me talk about some of those now. Here we have this area. If you control that spot at the beginning of your turn, then you get one of those cubes. The one I put my base camp on, this one here, that symbol means I'd be rolling an extra die. So as soon as I control that from that turn on, I'm actually rolling 4 dice. And there are some other spots. If you control these spots, which take a specific type of token I'll talk about in a second, then you control the skull. If you get all 4 of these, don't forget the relics, you win the game. And since I'm talking about the tokens, let me tell you the differences. Here we have the Zeppelins are the only ones that can go on the mountains, which are the snow-covered ones. So, to go in here, you need one of these. However, the Zeppelins have a special power which lets them at the beginning of your next turn, you can drop off a piece, which we're assuming is being dropped off from inside the Zeppelin, and then you can leave that piece there instead. The drillers are the ones that get you somnium, which is that symbol there, and those guys are going to get you these somnium crystals, which you'll need mostly for buying these cards. I'll get to the cards in a second. And then you have these guys, the explorers, which are the only ones that can go into the temples. The cards themselves do lots of different things. I won't really be going into those very much, but I'll show you just a couple so you see the artwork there and just the costs. There's two kinds of these. We have artifacts, which are those, and buildings, which are these. One of the main differences between them is that artifacts can be stolen, buildings cannot. I'll talk about stealing in just a second, but basically here on the side you can see costs. And the costs are in resources and in somnium crystals, as you can see there. So for this one, 4 and 2. Pretty pricey, but these do tend to be very powerful. So, stealing is one more thing you can do. When you go and attack and attempt to take over someone's base camp there, instead of kicking it off, you can simply steal something from them. And you're allowed to steal the cards, you're allowed to steal crystals, or you're allowed to steal the cubes. Depending on what you're going for, that's what you want to take from them. Be aware that the base camp comes with a built-in protection of 5. That's why there's a 5 printed on there. So for you to bump this guy off, and again, you have to choose to leave him on the board and steal something. It's not quite as easy as it sounds. So basically, that's the flow of the game. You're going to be rolling some dice. The first thing you do is you collect these. That's the very first step, as we can see here in the reference sheet. So, step 1 there, you're going to collect your resource cubes. You figure out how many dice you're going to roll. You can drop someone out of a Zeppelin. You use some effects of some specific cards. And then the phase 2 is when you actually roll your dice. You can conquer a free or unoccupied territory. Again, if it's protected, you're going to need that extra die. You can place one or several protecting dice if you have any left over. You can use resource cubes to modify those dice results. Again, 2 cubes is plus or minus 1, and you can even do 4 cubes for a plus 2, let's say. Then you are allowed to build a building or an invention. Again, those are the cards for the cost that's printed on them. Always 3 of those face up. You can steal a creation, a relic, or a somnium crystal. So those are the things you can steal. If, again, you choose not to bump someone's camp off, but instead leave them there and just steal something. You can sacrifice the crystals to roll an extra die once per turn. That's another use you have for these. Not just cards, but you can discard one to get more dice. And you can recover a token from the machine's graveyard, because eventually, after getting smacked around a lot, most of your tokens will be up there, so you need to get those back. So that's basically it. And then during the phase 3, you're going to harvest the crystals. It has to be with the drillers. And these spots that have the symbol give you more crystals, so you're going to be getting those. And then you replenish the technology cards. If someone bought one, you need to flip back over to 3. You keep doing that until you satisfy one of the 3 winning conditions, and whoever does that is the winner. So there it is, Wiraqocha. I didn't obviously go into everything. The cards, for example, I didn't really talk about, because the game has a lot of little rules I didn't just have time to go into. But I think that should give you a pretty good idea if it's something you'd want to look into. I like the game quite a bit. I think it's an excellent worker placement game. I like the theme, though it is pretty thin. I love that you're never quite sure how the game's going to end, with all 3 ways for it to end. I like the dice manipulation in it. I like the confrontation in it. The game's not passive. It's hard to attack one another and steal from one another, but it does happen. So there is that in it. And it just works for me. It's got a good pace. It's got a good flow. It's a fairly short game with lots going on. So if you're looking for an interesting, sort of outside the beaten path kind of worker placement game, I suggest you take a look at this one. A game I really, really like and recommend highly, Wiraqocha.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.